Are you ready to dive into the nostalgic adventure? Join me as I revisit 25 groundbreaking classics released between 1990 and 2015 that are still worth playing in 2025. From iconic adventures through exciting RPGs to timeless strategies. All of these games stood the test of time and are waiting for you to give them another chance to shine. So, grab a drink, park your trunk, and let's check them out together. Most of the LucasArts' adventure games were either humorous, well-written comedy stories that were entertaining all throughout. The Dig is not that far off. It's probably the first point-and-clicker ever that I would risk calling a cinematic adventure. It's an excellent sci-fi story that's a better version of a cinematic Armageddon. So you know, the big rock is hurling at an incredible speed towards the Earth, and it's not gonna miss it. It's aiming straight for Detroit, and it looks like it's going to be a bullseye. So to save the planet, a team is formed and sent to deal with it. And guess what? This time, we've decided not to leave the fate of the planet in the hands of all-rig drillers, regardless of how strong they are. Let the fact that the game's story was conceptualized by Steven Spielberg, dialogues written by Orson Scott Card, and all of it was silently overlooked by Ron Gilbert, be the best testament to its quality and an incentive to give it a chance, as it's definitely worth it. Have you ever wanted to be a part of the A-Team? I haven't, but I wouldn't mind being their boss/manager. You know, picking their missions, gear, and then sending them out to do the destructive thing, pew 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 enemies into non-existence, kaboom the buildings from the face of the planet and the likes. While in the same time I would be sitting somewhere warm and sunny, sipping drinks and slowly scrolling the web, seeking great deals on cat food and new assignments. So, Jagged Alliance 2 is more or less the same thing. You have this team of unique mercenaries that you manage, and they are on the biggest job of their lives, trying to free the island nation of Arulco from the oppressive rule of the Queen Didriana. All in a super fun, tactical, turn-based combat, using dozens upon dozens of different guns, explosives and tools. If you like your games with a dose of humor and a deep tactical challenge, this one's definitely not to skip. Even if Sid Meier is best known for his Civilization, Pirates and a bit less so for covert action. Both, as a game, and his uncanny ability to inject himself as a creative director into numerous successful and hella fun games, he was also a mastermind behind Alpha Centauri and a party responsible for the 9 of the letters on its gamebox cover too. Alpha Centauri kinda picks up where Civ left off, so with us finally reaching a far-off solar system and making it our own. It is very similar to his earlier Civ games, but modifies its gameplay mechanics a lot by adding terrain height, units built out of components that you could mix and match to your heart's desire, effectively having thousands of possible combinations, and by adding a planetary council, which works like an Alpha Centauri's governing political body. And all that is just the tip of an iceberg of changes and improvements it brought to the video gaming table. In short, if you like turn-based 4X strategies, it's gonna be really hard to find a better one. I noticed that I keep bringing up Albion in my videos often. Well, I talk about being a traveling multimillionaire a lot too, so I suppose you have to sift through what I output in these videos of mine, not to get lost in the craziness of my thought process. But Albion, I assure you, is definitely worth your time. It's a turn-based sci-fi fantasy adventure RPG, yeah, all that takes you on a huge-ass adventure on a mysterious, formerly considered as dead and desolate, lush alien planet of Albion. And while it's the series of unfortunate events and unpredictable systems failures that leave you stranded on the surface, it's your character's strength, beliefs, and will that will influence and change the course of the history of the entire planet. Albion uses a fun mix of a top-down overworld traversal, first-person perspective dungeon crawling exploration, and turn-based combat. Yep, once again, all that. Jokes aside though, Albion is an excellent, deep and well-told adventure that's kind of a hidden gem title these days. It could be argued that Metal Gear Solid was the most important video gaming release of 1998 and a game that solidified Hideo Kojima's video game design superstar status. I mean, for me, the game of 98 would be Fallout 2, but I'm a sucker for a good post-apo story. And Bacon, I'm a sucker for that too. Metal Gear Solid is this monumentally epic top-down stealth shooter that places you in the shoes of Solid Snake, the bondiest of all James Bonds and the snakiest of all snakes. And an agent so crafty and effective that he's the sole person hired by the US government to infiltrate the base of a renegade special forces unit called Foxhound to prevent them from using a stolen nuclear device and to learn the truth behind their mysterious leader, Liquid Snake. Metal Gear Solid is the best game to teach you that slower is faster, so if you need an extra lesson in that, it's worth to go through its rich story campaign in 2025 again. I loved Frontier for the freedom that it offered and how it made me feel. as if I was really there, in endless space, living my life trading, fighting and completing missions. And Freelancer, being a sci-fi first and third-person story-based simulator/trading game, is all that, but more polished and more playable. It's a fantastic space opera kind of a tale in an open universe comprised of 40 solar systems, with over 150 planets, 50 different factions and around 3000 NPCs. That's a lot of folks that I can bother talking about my cat. While Freelancer's story of a conflict between the nations of the Cyrus system is not only captivating but also fun to follow, it's a game that I would recommend to actually try out with a discovery mode. It adds a lot of the content to game's already rather gigantic world and plot and sorta turns it into a space-set MMORPG unlike anything else. Either way, alone or with a mod, it's a fantastic experience worth revisiting. Some would say that chilies and curries look like something that should be flushed and not eaten. But boy oh boy, do they both taste like heaven. The spices, the heat, the aftertaste, yummy! And same could be said about Lemmings. I mean, not flashing, they're not the goldfish after all, but they do look like a relic of a time past, sporting a low resolution, low color and close to no fidelity graphics, with a lot of soul and love though. Despite the presentation, however, Lemmings' gameplay more than defends itself even today. And the puzzling challenges of you leading the aimlessly wandering tiny creatures to safety through countless increasingly more demanding levels is still incredibly addictive. Lemmings may not wow anyone today, but it's definitely as fun to play as it was in 1991. If you grew up in the 80s and 90s, watching all the action movies and dreaming of being an overgrown mountain of muscles to save the cities, countries or planets while causing as much mayhem all around as it was possible, or if you hoped to be a warrior for good, karate chopping / roundhouse kicking bodies in their chins, jaws and balls, well, boy oh boy, do I have news for you. Broforce is all that and more. It's an homage to both classic Contra and Metal Slug games and all the action movies heroes of the yesteryears that you could think of. I mean, its entire premise takes you through a huge-ass action and explosions-packed campaign, annihilating literally thousands of bodies and downing dozens of bosses. All that with around 40 unique and based on the classic movies heroes, here aptly named Bros. So you'll use the Ram Bro, Bromando, Broheart, MacBrover, Brominator and Indiana Brones, among many others, each with their own skills and mechanics. And the fact that Broforce comes with literally thousands of extra downloadable user-made levels makes it near infinitely replayable title for 1 to 4 players in couch co-op. Oh, and before I forget, it actually got a re-release this year with new bros added, so it's even more brotastic than it's ever been. Why would I recommend SimCity 2000 as a game to replay in 2025 when we just had Cities Skylines to release last year? Well, because in my eyes, it's an ideal city simulation that never got old. Sure, it doesn't have nearly as many features, bells and whistles, city molding tools, or even as intertwined correlations between all the gears that power it all, but that is precisely its strongest suit. It allows you to craft the town of your dreams, respond to all the emergencies that may befall it, slowly work on evolving it into a city and then metropolis, and never wonder what, how and where you need to do better. It's a simple but not basic, and complex but not complicated little game that's as good for a multiple hours worth play session as it is for an odd half an hour here and there just to touch upon a neighborhood or two. It offers a lot of depth, but doesn't drown you in its mechanics, and it's still as satisfying as it ever was. Also, a giant ice spider robots from space. Who doesn't like that? Would you believe if I told you that The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was the first Zelda game that I played and also the first that I completed? You know, it's actually irrelevant if you would, cause that's what happened. And going back to any other after going through Ocarina first was like riding a bicycle after having spent weeks zooming in a Lambo. It's still a vehicle, but gosh darn do I miss leather seats and reaching those ungodly speeds. Same with Zelda. Sure, it was not the first game in the series, but it was so much better than anything that came before, and most that came after, that playing earlier entries after it was at best slightly disappointing. It was also the first ever 3D Zelda game, and one that used a very fun and a very rarely seen music playing mechanic, where playing the titular ocarina was required for a lot of puzzling and also for the plot to progress. In a way, it was a loom game from years before, made it the way it was supposed to be. I never wanted to be a seafaring explorer or a discoverer of the new islands and continents. It was not for me, and there was nothing to discover left by then anyway. As a kid, I wanted to be a superhero, preferably Batman or Spider-Man, if their slots would free up that is, or a spaceship captain like Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek. Not gonna lie, I've not fulfilled any of these dreams. But while the seas never drew me in, the addictive gameplay of Colonization did, and with such an ease no less that I didn't believe it happening even when seeing it happen in real time. You know what, now that I think of it, I'm not surprised in the slightest. It's an excellent strategy that's close enough in its design to Sid Meier's Civilization for me to instantly know how to jump in, but also plenty unique and deep for having to spend time replaying it to learn all that there was to it. And since Mr. Meier once again had his name plastered all over the game box, it was like having a Nintendo seal of quality, but for PC. Oh, and the music. The music in Colonization is just fantastic. Cyberpunk 2077, especially after all the patching and fixing that's been done on it after the disappointing initial release, is a synonym of a cyberpunk video game today. It's an excellent first-person RPG with deep, engaging and also very touching story to boot. But while it's an amazing experience, not many people realize that it's hardly the first one. And 2000's Deus Ex was definitely one of the first few. It takes place in a dystopian high-tech low-life 2050s and puts you in the shoes of JC Denton, a UNATCO anti-terrorist agent who must figure out and solve global conspiracy. And that mission will take you all around the world, placing you in various different role-playing scenarios. The best thing about it though is that you can tackle them in many different ways. You can shoot your way through the hordes of enemies, you can sneak your way around them, you can lockpick your way to the target ignoring bodies on the way altogether, or you can hack them too. And all that are just a few of the possible scenarios. Oh, and since Deus Ex is a cyberpunk game, you can naturally get cyber implants. You can get so many of them in fact that you'll turn into a walking bipedal hedgehog that spreads death and destruction through bullets and hack attacks.
Iron and copper.
The smell of death surrounds me. I may have to pause here and take a shower. While arguably the second Diablo was a better and more features-packed game, it actually received a remaster a few years back, so it's hardly a classic, and I always found the first one to have darker, heavier and more depressing atmosphere anyway. So while it clearly could have looked and animated better, gameplay-wise, OG Diablo still runs like a charm and is as fun to mow through thousands of mobs in it as it's ever been. The enemies are aplenty, the bosses are really cool and fun to hammer down, and the loot, well, the loot is what made Diablo work and what was shamelessly replicated by dozens of copycat games that released for years after. Either way, defeating the evil that was brewing under Tristram is still fun and definitely worth another playthrough in 2025. With the new Elder Scrolls game on the horizon and Skyrim having something like, I don't know, 67, 68 releases, re-releases and remasters by now, I think it would be really cool to come back to the first quote-unquote modern game in the series, Oblivion. And yes, Morrowind was also 3D, and now with the Skywind mod it's more accessible than ever, but I always thought of it as the last title in the original trilogy, which is a bit silly as they're hardly connected. But since Morrowind has this cult status now and Skyrim's been steadily releasing every 13-14 or so days, I thought that the fourth game deserved some good old-fashioned video game loving. And it does, cause it's a fantastic story tasking with finding Emperor Uriel Septim's illegitimate son so that he could carry on the Septim bloodline and help prevent monsters from the Oblivion dimension from entering the Cyrodiil. Traditionally for the series, skills in Oblivion level up on use, and the combat is action-packed and real-time. Parappa the Rapper is one of the weirdest, cutest, simplest and most addictive games ever made. It's not a game to steal months from your life, but for a single playthrough, or just to fire it up once every full moon for a few stages of fun with friends, it's great. It's not overly demanding, it's nearly infinitely replayable, amazing and works in a controller-passing couch co-op environment like a charm. Since kids love it, grown-ups enjoy it, in many ways it's a perfect game. There's a story to it too, of Parappa trying to impress a girl that he's into, but in buckets of fun that the game will serve, the plot gets diluted, easily ignored and you hardly ever care for it. And given a very low entry threshold of Parappa and steadily growing challenge, it's an excellent title to pull out of the hat in 2025 to have some innocent but also laughs-filled fun with friends. War never changes. But the Fallout games do, and those that released after the New Vegas are broken in one way or another. Either by failing to recapture what the spirit of Fallout is, or by not understanding that the role-playing game should provide just that. Role-playing, the ability to craft your own character and live out his/her life within the confines of the game's world, to make meaningful choices and face their consequences, be it good or bad, and be able to approach quests and puzzles in more than one way. And while the newer games seem to be laser focused on shooting only, New Vegas has all three of these qualities and much more. There's a deep, long and involving engine of a story there, in which you're just a small and seemingly insignificant cog. There is a morale system at play, people remember you and your actions, which themselves actually leave a lasting mark on the entire wasteland. So, unlike all other games in today's video, New Vegas is not a game to replay in 2025, it's one to replay numerous times with different character builds, and 2025 just happens to be a year when you may want to jump back in. I really wanted to add Heroes of Might and Magic 2 here, as it's my favorite entry in the series. But it would be an unfair suggestion, as objectively speaking the next, third entry was a considerably better game. And while I may find it looking way worse with its early pre-rendered sprites and backdrops, most of you seemed not to care about it, and mechanically it was a bang-on release. So, today, I have no choice but to go for it as my pick for the game worth replaying, especially that the countless total conversion mods have been released for it, making it a better game. One of them that I'd like to highlight here in particular is the Horn of the Abyss mod. It not only changes a lot of the basic gameplay mechanics, but also adds the entirely new faction of Factory, with its own town, buildings and creatures, and a ton of new features to the base game. So replaying the heroes with it in a group of friends feels like having a new game that will easily provide months of multiplayer fun. Pinball Fantasies may look like it released in 1992, because it did. It may play like it was a product of the early 90s, because it was, and it may sound like we thought pinball games should in the arcades, and it does. But gosh golly, and whatever the else 1950s older gentleman would have said in this particular scenario, is it a great game. The devs took what they learned from the earlier release of Pinball Dreams and crafted a timeless and infinitely replayable perfect depiction of the real thing in a digital form. Fantasies comes with 4 original and hella playable tables, each of which offers unique challenges and point scoring opportunities. And while arguably the modern Pinball FX games are better, in nearly all possible technical aspects of their design, there's something uncanny, something difficult to dress in words, especially by a silly foreigner such as myself, that makes Fantasies a title that never gets old. I'd say soul, but I'm not a believer, so I'll say bacon, because bacon makes everything better. I love the original hyphenated XCom trilogy. I mean, those of you who are not new to this channel know that very well, because I keep mentioning them whenever I can, like here, now, today. But 2012's XCOM Enemy Unknown by Firaxis, and especially with year later's Enemy Within DLC, and most importantly, the Long War mod released shortly after, broke me. Not in a bad and painful way, mind you, in a good and painful way. It remade the game from ground up, changed nearly everything about it, from classes through missions to gear, and expanded it to the point of it feeling like an entirely new product that offered thousands, yes, thousands of hours of very challenging and extremely punishing gameplay. But all that is not the reason for it being here. My playing it in a group of friends in couch co-op, where each of us would have their own custom-named and geared soldiers, tackling the alien scourge together, every single evening day by day, working towards the same joint goal, is what made me put it here. Because I hope that in 2025 you'll manage to find a friend or a few too, and have a similarly exciting experience. I'm not gonna lecture you here about Half-Life and all the different technological achievements that can be accredited to it, because for one, you don't care about it, and for two, I've gotta manage to finish this segment as soon as possible and then play with my cat, as his sad eyes telegraph the need for my attention, staring at me with unrequited love. So Half-Life is a first-person perspective story-based shooter that's a first part in Valve's cult classic trilogy. And yes, I'm gonna stick to calling it a trilogy, a man can hope after all. And it tells a tale of Gordon Freeman trying to escape the Black Mesa facility after an experiment with an alien tech going wrong, spawning a portal to the alien dimension through which they happily jumped into ours and shot all over the place. Perhaps not literally, but it felt disrespectful. We would have never done that to their home. Either way, it's about time that we consider replaying the classic, especially that a few years back, fan-made re-release called Black Mesa dropped and it raised the game to the modern standards of the presentation. Fable games were a big thing when they released, as they aimed to turn the RPG genre upside down. They not only had the world respond to your actions and change based on them, depending if they were good or bad, but also had your character go through similar changes too. What's more, they banked heavily on NPC interactions and how they saw and acted around you. They added an element of a working economy too, which was not really a given in RPGs before. So the prices would change, you could buy nearly all buildings that you saw, and then either move in and decorate them or rent them out, and overall, Fable 2 felt very fresh and new. While the first game had that wow factor, this second was more polished and near completely fulfilling the developer's vision, even if only really being a complicated tale of revenge. and since it was Peter Molyneux that came up with it all, you could count that two things would take place. That the game would miss many of its promised features, and that it would be great and beloved nonetheless. You know what I'm upset with? I mean, other than the socio-political state of the world and my constantly needing and not having enough money or time. All the other Indiana Jones movies, other than the first three, they were perhaps not the worst thing ever, but compared to the originals, they sucked. Balls, no less. Balls. But you know what would make an amazing one? Script for Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. 1992's point-and-click adventure game that's so well written, amazing, captivating and replayable that it's a crime that we've received the two subpar movies and not this remade as one. Still, even if we can't watch it, we can definitely play it. An Indy and his friend Sophia's adventure that takes them all around the world trying to thwart the fascist villain's evil plot to harness the power of Atlantis will keep you on the edge of your seat all throughout and provide a very satisfying conclusion, recapturing the essence of the original Indy franchise. Life is Strange is a cinematic, heartfelt sci-fi adventure game that I've replayed at least a good 3-4 times, and it always left me broken and depressed for the following week or two. It's hard to explain why, but the storytelling, the care put to all the characters in it and what they go through, tickle that sentimental and weak string in my heart, and all that I hear after is it playing sad music. In essence, it's a story of two girls, Max and Chloe, reconnecting after being apart for a few years, all the while learning how they've changed throughout that time and how they grew as persons. They decide to investigate a disappearance of Chloe's friend who helped her through a difficult time and a personal loss when Max was away, and it leads them to this terrible truth and possibly universe-shattering consequences. While Life is Strange serves many different meaningful choices influencing its story and changing the way its plot and ending plays out, I've not made a single different one in either of the times I played it. Because my brain got in the way each and every time, effectively preventing me from picking what was incompatible with my inner beliefs. Go figure. While arguably it's the fourth Grand Theft Auto game that's for whatever the reason the most overlooked out of 57 of them all, or however many released by now, I feel that it's the 2002's Vice City that deserves a special mention and maybe a week of your time in 2025. You know, in preparation for the sixth one. A Miami-like Vice City is set in a very iconic 1980s period and follows Tommy Vercetti, a gangster who just got off a 15-year-long prison sentence. He's been jailed for not ratting out his family and now he needs to find a way to acclimate to this new and alien to him modern 1980s world. Given that the game feels like the Miami Vice TV series gone bad, as in if it followed law-breaking hoodlums and nightcaps, and it all plays out to the tune of 1980s biggest hits, I believe that it's the best entry in the series to jump into and remind ourselves why we loved it. I'm not gonna lie to you, Screamer 2 is a personal favorite of mine and it's here because I wanted to indoctrinate you into loving it as much as I do. It may not look or sound great today by any metrics available having released nearly 3 decades ago, but holy crap son, is it still fun to play. It's a fast, action-packed, purely arcade racer that perfected the formula and could have easily released today in one of those nearly always open Japanese arcades with improved graphics, steering wheel and a comfortable chair and be a huge success. Well, as much as an arcade game can be these days. There are only 4 cars and a handful of tracks in Screamer 2, but they're all considerably different from one another and uniquely feeling. And if you're not in the market for a complicated simulation or a game that will make you go through a 7 seasons long quote-unquote racing campaign, then there's hardly a better one to jump into for a quick race or two. Yes, even today. What do you think about my picks for titles worth coming back to in 2025? I believe that it's a good set of excellent classics, but I'm curious to read what you think about it, so make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below, and maybe share it too, it helps more than you know. If you didn't, then don't naturally. It was fun talking to you as usual, and I'll see you, or more accurately, talk to you very soon.